Yeah, let's not talk about what we were just talking about.
No,
Uh,
no. Let's talk about how sunny it is there. How warm is it?
well, it's oddly so. So yeah, I'm in Sausalito, just north of San Francisco. The and I was as I was driving here, I saw the fog, and so I thought, uh-oh, because what happens with the weather here, the area is the Pacific Ocean is very cold. The current is coming down from Alaska, and it comes south by Canada and Washington, Oregon, and Northern California. During the summer, the interior valleys in San Francisco or east of San Francisco, mainly the Central Valley, heat up, and so hot air rises. Yeah, you probably didn't bargain on a meteorot weather lesson, but anyway, the hot air rises and the wind rushes in, and as the wind rushes in, so does the fog, and so that's why oftentimes people, I feel sorry for people that come from all over the world. So they have just fogged in. And so you think, oh, a few people have said, I don't right from there's no fog. So the fog is really nifty, and even it's still not. So anyway, so with the
Hey,
other,
Rob, you're breaking up, my friend.
oh, I am. It's
Yeah,
bad.
yeah.
The wind is picked up.
That wind
Should
is
I-
taking
should-
over your audio.
Oh, there it's died down again. Anyway, I guess we should get on with mortgage banking.
We should
So-
go with mortgage banking.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm in Sausalito, overlooking San Francisco, and if the wind does pick up again, just tell me to go in the car.
Okay, I'll do it. I'll do it. Hey, thanks everybody for joining us. We'll go ahead and get started. I'm Melissa Langdale. I'm with the Mortgage Collaborative, joined by Rob Chrisman today, the infamous Rob Chrisman, I feel like saying.
Infamous.
Yes, yes. And Tom Galucci is not joining us today, is unable to join us. He's trusting me immensely with this. So y'all have the freedom to send him a note and tell him I totally messed up. That's completely fine.
It's not as is. It's not as if.
It's not as if what?
What's that?
Say that one more time. All right. Yep. I think we're gonna have to get you in the car. So thanks everybody for joining us. Happy Friday afternoon on the almost beginning of Father's Day weekend. Happy to have everybody with us. And I thought I'd start today with something kind of fun. It's one of my most favorite things to ask people, Rob. You and I have been getting to know each other over the last couple of weeks as we've kind of been in the Rundown series together. And so I'd love to hear this from you. So when you were kind of younger, Rob, what did you want to be when you grew up? I don't think I've ever seen you.
Speechless. I'm trying to think different phases. I think my mom kept a little book, like here's Robert in first grade, and what's your favorite food? What do you want to be when you grow up, kind of stuff. And I think I used to want to be a baseball star and so forth, which is natural. I will say that in high school, I either wanted to be an architect or an oceanographer. But prior to that was nothing too exciting, baseball, football player. What about you?
So I had something similar, but it was actually our kindergarten teacher had us write down what we wanted to be when we were maybe it was first grade. Either way, had us write down what we wanted to be when we grew up, and then she actually mailed it to us when we graduated high school. So it was a really kind of cool and fun thing to get, because you totally forget about it over time. But my senior year, I got what I had written down, and it was I wanted to be a ballerina, similar to your kind of baseball star. I wanted to be a ballerina, and I wanted to be the first female president of the United States. So
Well, this is next best to that. Yeah,
very,
that would not have worked with me because my parents were always trying to hide from the law. And so there was, we never really had a permanent mailing address that the teacher could have mailed us anything.
oh goodness. Well, so I asked Rob that for a reason, guys. It's, it's so funny, our industry, people get into this industry and they almost not quite on purpose, right? You have like friends that invite you in, or family that kind of pull you in. And, oftentimes it's an industry that is, it has a whole bunch of people kind of starting from scratch as they get into it. And over the last week, as I've gotten more active in the rundown, and I've had several people come up to me and let me know how much they have learned from you over the years about cap markets. So I thought it would be kind of fun for us to learn from Rob today. What do you guys think? If you put a little yes or like
no, don't ever ask people. Not like you start yelling and screaming. But I need to address. I think it was Amy asking me if I live in my car, which Melissa could be a whole different conversation about the last time you actually spent the night in a car. I've got some just funny, horrible stories about that, but there are several boxes in the back. One box is, so my daughter is expecting a daughter on Tuesday. And so there's boxes back here of things that need to be built by me in order to accommodate this infant. So anyway, so I don't live in a car, but this car right now is very functional in terms of hauling things. So yeah, happy to help, happy to answer any questions about capital markets. I know there's some capital markets experts on here who could do a better job than I, but I'm certainly willing to give it a shot.
Well, so, on this program, we talk a lot about kind of CPI and PPI and inflation, right? We talk a lot about job reports and housing inventory. And obviously this past week was had no shortage of data being released, right? It was on the news all the time. And those things are really big economic indicators. But like, what does that matter to mortgage? Can you fill us in on your,
Sure. Where to start? So the basic premise is that, and I don't know, people on the show have heard me say this many times, but there's always data coming out, and we don't know what the data is going to be, nor does the Federal Reserve, nor do investors, nor does anybody know what the next employment figure is going to show, or the next consumer price index number, producer price index. Nor, even if you did know, sometimes you could not guess what the bond market was going to do with that information, because sometimes it comes out right as expected, regardless of whatever the announcement is, and the bond market sells off and rates go up, or the converse can happen. And so much of it is built, though, on expectations, like, oh, we expect unemployment to be this. Oh, we expect consumer prices to be that, producer prices to be this, and there's news every week, to your point, of varying degrees of importance. And all of that news is put together. All of those releases are put together by some very powerful supercomputers within the Federal Reserve, or within Morgan Stanley, or within Stanford, or whatever think tanks there are, to try to gauge the strength of the economy. And if the economy is limping along, then rates tend to go down. If the economy is going gangbusters, or inflation is out of control, as we've seen here over the last year and a half, then rates tend to go up. And the general thinking is that so much of our society, so much of consumer behavior and company behavior is dependent upon credit and being able to borrow money. And what is the price of that money that anything that impacts the price of the money impacts consumers' behavior and companies' behavior, and they react accordingly. So put all that in real simple terms. If you come to me and you say, I want to borrow $100,000 because I want to start a little ballerina training school, and I say, wow, that's great. You look like a ballerina. I'm sure it's great. That's a great business model or business plan you put together. I will loan you that $100,000 and I will only charge you 1%. You'll be like, great, away we go. Because in your model, you're thinking, okay, I'm going to get so many students and those students are going to pay this amount of tuition. I'll be able to cover that 1% interest on that $100,000 loan. If you come in and we go through the same process, and this looks great, I'm going to charge you 10% interest. You're going to think, oh my gosh, I didn't think that, the Bank of Rob was going to charge me 10%. Well, I can't cover that 10% by the tuition of these little ballerinas. Sorry, I'm being sexist. I don't know what the male ballet star, whatever. Anyway, so you think I'm not gonna put that school together. I'm not gonna borrow the money. I'm not gonna hire ballerina instructors. I'm not gonna rent the space from the landlord. I'm not gonna buy tutus. I'm not gonna, there's economic slowdown happens not only with your ballerina school because rates are 10% instead of 1%, but there's hundreds or thousands or millions of people who are making decisions based on interest rates. And so there's a lot of people who aren't going to borrow money because of, rates are too high, or they aren't going to spend money on their credit card, or they aren't going to use their credit card because their credit card rate is too high. So what happens is rates go up, spending drops, consumer spending in theory drops. And we'll get to the in theory part in a minute. But so anything that impacts interest rates, trickles down to the consumer behavior and company behavior. Apple Computer may not build that plant near Austin, Texas, if they have to pay 8% on money, whereas at 3%, it might have made sense. So they don't build the plant. Mm-hmm. When you have economic news that comes out every week, every month, some data is weekly, some data is monthly, analysts look at that data to determine, okay, the consumer price index did this, the producer price index did that, unemployment did this. What impact does that have on the general strength of the economy? What does it tell us about the economy? And what it tells us is the economy is doing well or it's not doing well. And therefore interest rates may be influenced, may go up, may go down based on that piece of news. Now, the news that comes out, generally speaking, I know that you're near Austin, Texas, Central Time Zone. The important news that comes out is generally at 7:30 in the morning. West Coast, it comes out at 5:30 a.m. On the East Coast, comes out at 8:30. There is other news that comes out during the day, but it's of less importance. And so the important news comes out, whether it's unemployment, comes out at 5:30 a.m. West Coast time, consumer prices, producer prices, and so forth, weekly jobless claims, things like that. So the news that comes out daily, weekly, monthly, is viewed as how does it impact the economy, and what does it tell us about the strength of the economy, which in turn, what does it tell us about the direction of interest rates? Long answer. Time for a drink.
Yeah, that's okay. So obviously companies like mortgage banks or banks have to figure out have to use those that economic news reports that are coming out, the data that's being shared, to kind of project out over the life of the loan that they're giving somebody, what the likelihood of that, loan being paid based on what type of business that person is going into, a ballet school or, whatever, in paying that back over time. So they're looking at all of those things to kind of project out the impact and the likelihood of that loan being paid over time, right? All right. So
Yes. So can I interrupt?
No, go ahead. Yeah.
So you're kind of getting into mortgage rates 201 there instead of 101.
Sorry.
So you're no, don't apologize, because I think it's important when sometimes the bond market may not move. Let's say interest rates, the treasury rates, whatever, were steady all week long. You could have fluctuations in the value of servicing during the week, which will impact the price that borrowers see on their rate sheets, because the servicing value changes, to your point, based on perceptions of that loan or that pool of loans potentially paying off early, potentially never paying off. The credit, if interest rates are doing something or whatever, or some credit news comes out that impacts that pool of borrowers or their ability to repay those loans, will impact the value of servicing, in which case it is reflected on the rate sheets. But sometimes that information that may impact the value of servicing doesn't impact interest rates necessarily. So they're a little bit separate, a little bit together, but it does matter overall, because the rates and prices that borrowers see through different lenders are based on several factors. One is the mortgage-backed security market that's impacted by the CPI, the producer prices, and so forth. Part of that price that borrowers see is the value of servicing and what investors and servicers are willing to pay for that kind of loan. And it's also based on some other factors, such as how competitive that lender wants to be. What are the loans that are, and so forth. Not only this market that impacts interest rates, it's also these other factors. And I think it's important for originators to know what those factors are.
Let's talk about another thing that kind of affects rates and kind of doesn't affect rates, like the Fed's announcement this week, right? I think there's a lot of misconceptions around kind of short-term rates and how that's affecting kind of long-term rates. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
And let me lead off by saying something that I'm really fond of saying, and that is that the Federal Reserve does not set mortgage rates. What happens, though, is that the news that comes out, the data, and the Fed likes saying we're data dependent. Well, everybody should be data dependent. Nobody should be set in their ways, because you could think interest rates are going up and then unemployment skyrockets and inflation plummets and suddenly rates aren't going up anymore. So you need to keep your knees bent, is the old football saying in that, or basketball saying, or maybe ballerina saying. Anyway, the news that comes out with regard to the Fed accumulates all this data. The Fed has certainly a lot more number crunching ability than I have, or that you have, or that TMC has. But the Federal Reserve looks at the data coming out and says, okay, here's what's going on, and combating inflation is job one. And so the Federal Reserve does not want to be seen as continuing to be turning a blind eye to inflation. They want to be seen as inflation hawks, like birds, like hawks versus doves, and really wanting to fight inflation. And so the news that came out this week that the Federal Reserve was going to pause and not do anything with interest rates was expected. The fact that the Federal Reserve basically said, but we're not done raising rates because inflation is still higher than where we'd like to see it. That wasn't necessarily a huge surprise, but it was a bit of it did cause the market to say, huh, okay, this is interesting. And the Federal Reserve is pausing. They're not going to do anything in this June, this meeting, but the Federal Reserve still wants to be seen as being strong, doing what they can to fight inflation, because it's no fun if inflation is 5% and everybody's wages are going up 3%. You're coming out behind. And so the Federal Reserve still wants to be seen as fighting inflation, but they want to give it another month or two to see how things shape up, because inflation has been declining. It's going in the right direction. The consumer continues to spend. The employment market is still strong. So let's give it another month or so and just see how things shape up. Because frankly, if you think about the US economy, it is like an aircraft carrier, and you can't turn an aircraft carrier on a dime. And so, it takes a while for things to impact things. So I think the Federal Reserve, it was expected that they were going to not do anything. That was okay. Some of the verbiage in the press conference was a little bit like, oh my gosh, they may continue to raise rates. And that's at this point priced into the market. And so once again, the Federal Reserve doesn't set interest rates. What it does is use the same data that we use in trying to establish the current state of the economy and act accordingly.
So that's the other reason why it's important for us to watch all those economic indicators, right? Is to have a better sense of kind of what's coming down the road from, what the Fed is looking at as well, even though it doesn't affect mortgage rates directly. We've got a question from somebody in the audience that I wanted to share with you that has to deal with inflation. It says 2% is the magic number the Fed wants to see. This number was created apparently during a Fed meeting in 1996. Coming into 2023, the Long Beach dock workers just got a new contract with a 10% raise for the next 4 years. Or airline pilots just got a new contract with a hefty raise. Wages all around are higher. Is it not time to reconder the 2% number to possibly 3% or higher? Is 2% still realistic, Rob, you think?
Well, that is the $64,000 question that's out there, because 2% is somewhat outdated, I would say. Inflation is such a interesting animal. I mean, we could talk for hours. I mean, economists have spend weeks talking about inflation and measuring inflation, and does it incorporate everything that it should? And inflation impacts people differently, because frankly, Melissa, if you were getting a home loan right now, let's say you're going to go out and buy a home, you're watching interest rates very carefully. Maybe I don't care about interest rates. I don't keep a balance on my credit card. I'm not out in the market shopping for homes. I'm happy with my 2 3/4% 30-year fixed mortgage. I don't care what interest rates do. Let them go to the moon. They don't impact me. They do impact certain people in certain ways. Just like if I don't buy rice, what do I care if rice prices go up? Tomorrow, I talk about egg prices in my commentary. Well, egg prices are coming down. May saw the largest decline in egg prices since 1951, since Truman was in the White House. Mm-hmm. Well, it's interesting because earlier this year, eggs were all over the headlines because of the bird flu that was killing off the laying population. Egg prices were skyrocketing heading into Easter. Oh my gosh, it's the end of the world. Now they're going the other way. Well, I eat eggs, and restaurants that I go to use eggs. So that does impact me. Lumber went way up a few years ago, and now it's come way down. Well, I don't use a lot of lumber because I'm not building a house. So the price of lumber doesn't necessarily impact me, but it does impact builders, and therefore the price of homes. It impacts people who are remodeling houses. So different parts of the economy go up and down in price, and impact different pools of the population. And that's why it's so difficult to measure. I mean, it's so difficult to see the impact on the economy. I'll give you one more quick example that I like to use. And that is if the tires on my car last 20% longer, but cost 10% more, all right, is that actually negative inflation? Am I better off, even though the price of my tires went up 10%? Boy, they last longer. They're more durable. You see less people on the side of the road with flat tires because the tires are better constructed and so forth. And so how do you measure that inflation when you have something that lasts longer, but it costs more? Same with phones. I don't go out and buy a new phone every year. What do I care if the price of phones go up? But when I do need a phone, I'm going to suffer the consequences. But up until then, it didn't really matter. So the inflation measures that come out, they can have a target of 2%, 3%, 4%. I think 2% might be a little on the low side, but that's up to them to decide. One of the interesting things that we've talked about on the show a number of times is property values, housing values, home values. And do we really want the market going up in housing 20% a year and seeing 20% a year of price appreciation? Well, anybody will tell you no if they think about it for a little bit. If they just bought their house and it goes up 20%, yahoo. But if it goes up 20% for 2 years in a row, suddenly you're really talking about affordability issues, and you're really talking about people almost being trapped in their homes because there's so much equity there. They don't want to sell. They don't want to move. There's all kinds of issues. You're pricing people out of the market if it's going up that much. So I think a lot of people in our industry like to see 3%, 5%, 7% appreciation steadily increasing, rather than these huge 20% jumps. So inflation is a touchy subject. It's a very complicated subject. And what happens is the Federal Reserve doesn't only look at the producer price index or the consumer price index. It looks at, PCE, the core rates of certain measures. It looks at wage growth. It looks at hourly earnings. It looks at a lot of components that we may not look at or even think about that really come out. Maybe the Fed looks at, the price of band saws in the Northwest, because, band saws cut lumber. And if the price of bandsaw is going up, why are they going up, and how does that impact lumber? And they model all these things out. So it's a complicated subject. I personally think, 2% seems a little bit low. I think it would be difficult for us to get back down to 2% over any kind of short period of time. Over a long period of time, very possibly we could, but not probably in the near future.
We got one more question from the audience. It says, why are the spreads so high? 10-year is at 3.7 and conventional rates are at 7% at a price of 99. Can you walk us through that a little bit?
Sure. How are we doing on time, by the way? Got like four more minutes.
We got 4 more minutes. Yep.
Okay. Well, I think that was wasn't that like a Justin Timberlake Madonna song? Anyway, so the spread is blown out, as they say. Traders, it's blown out. What causes that? Well, a couple different things. First of all, there is a spread that bond traders measure, and they look at, let's say the 10-year. Although bond traders, mortgage-backed security traders, tend to look at more like the 5-year or 7-year treasuries, but the 10-year is nice and easy to talk about. So we'll talk about the 10-year. So the 10 years at whatever it is, 3.7, 3.8, and you're right, 7% for mortgage rates. Why that huge difference? Well, one of the problems is the banking issues that we had some months ago have created the need for institutions to sell mortgage-backed securities. And the basic law of supply and demand says, okay, if somebody's selling a bunch of stuff, then the price is going to be impacted. If there's only 10 Mickey Mantle rookie cards in the world, and so has all 10, and they decide to sell all 10 at once, well, that's a problem. It'll drive the price down. When banks, through the FDIC, when banks are having to sell mortgage-backed securities, or the FDIC has instructed banks to sell mortgage-backed securities, it tends to drive the price down and the rates up. That's one of the primary things influencing the spread between treasuries and mortgage-backed securities. You also have, we've been listening to this talk about recession for years now. All right. Well, if we do get hit with some kind of recession, that impacts the credit quality of the existing borrowers who are out there. And if you were, I know that every borrower out there has to meet the ability to repay. Some are better at meeting the ability to repay than others. If you have kind of a marginal borrower and we get into a recession and they lose their job, now what? What happens to that loan? What happens to a pool of loans that loan is in? And so you have a little bit of nervousness out there with regard to the possibility of a recession impacting mortgages. And so you combine those things. And then the last thing is you have, along the lines of supply and demand, you have banks who, because of the Signature Bank and Silicon Valley Bank and so forth, who have less of an appetite for mortgage-backed securities than they did 6 months ago, say. So there's less interest in buying pools of mortgages. And so the interest rates on those mortgages have had to go up in order to attract buyers. And so all of these things take time to sort out, but those are the three primary reasons why the spread between treasuries and mortgage rates is as wide as it is. So put on my optimistic hat here. Once the FDIC and so forth are done, selling some of these pools of mortgage-backed securities, or all of them, and once people get used to perhaps the feeling that maybe we're not we're not going to have a huge recession and the borrowers are going to be okay, and once banks start looking at mortgage-backed security pools, thinking, we want to own these again, then I think the spreads can come back down. Until then, we could be faced with this kind of rate environment.
Well, you answered that in exactly 4 minutes. I'm very proud. So that was a lot to pull
my high
into
school
4 minutes.
teacher would be good. Well, happy to do so.
Yeah. So, before we wrap up, any fun plans for Father's Day? I'll do an easier question for you.
Is this weekend Father's Day?
It is. Yeah.
I don't even know. Last weekend was my birthday. We've got my focus is more on my daughter, Marie, and the baby watch kind of thing. I mean, I'm not delivering the child, for God's sake. I hope not. But I think just play some basketball and spend go for some hikes with my daughter. What about you?
We're going to play a little family golf. I think that's like our normal weekend thing, and then do some good dinner together on Father's Day. Just hang out together as a family. So.
Are you you're in Austin? Are there goat ball pieces of hail? Sorry, somebody emailed me from Texas. Sent me a text saying this hail is the size of goat. Yeah. Anyway, male parts. Is the weather crazy down there?
Yeah, there have been parts of Texas that have done. We've been super lucky here. We got one storm over the summer, and other than that, it's bright and sunny outside.
Bright and shiny people.
I don't know. Outside right now, and we'll be in the 90s, so it'll be warm this weekend, but it'll be fun.
Yeah, very good. I like Austin. I need to get down there again. Anyway,
all right, thanks everybody for joining us. Thanks for spending your Friday afternoon with us. Thank you so much, Rob, for all the information you shared with us today, and we'll see you again next week.
And thank you, Ashley, for that note, and yeah, take care. Thank you.